in?
Yeah.
Okay. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put on, my voice is going to get louder. Why? Because I'm putting on a voice changer that makes my voice more loud, essentially, because our audio isn't working. So if you can't hear me, I recommend you turn me up because I can't get much louder than this without screaming. So welcome in. This is our very first class that we're going to be hosting throughout Pride Month, and depending on the success of these events, probably at least once or twice a month for the next however long that we're able to do them. Today's topic is LGBTQ plus figures throughout history. Come on, push the button. But first, I want to give a disclaimer. This is a passion project. I am not a historian, so if there's anything that you hear me say that you want more insight in, or this isn't actually how it happened, or et cetera, there is going to be a question and comment thing at the very end, but by all means bring it up, because this is my surface level research. This is not like a months-long project that I've been doing. For centuries, LGBTQ plus people have shaped culture, science, art, and politics, yet many of our identities have been erased, hidden, or rewritten. So why this topic? The goal of this is to spotlight the different LGBTQ individuals who have shaped history, and most of them were overlooked, misunderstood, or in actually most of the cases deliberately erased. And when we say hidden, we're talking about people who have lived their remarkable authentic selves, and their identities have been, I guess, hidden and limited by prejudice, censorship, and all of that good stuff, which we will get into, actually not good stuff, that we will get into in a later slide. What does discussing this topic benefit? Like, who does this benefit? For centuries, LGBTQ plus people have shaped culture, science, art, all that good stuff, right? Especially the arts and science. It's actually crazy how many scientists are gay. I don't know if that's like some weird overlap, but a lot of their identities were rewritten or hidden. This presentation, like I said before, is going to shine a light on these individuals whose stories were buried by prejudice and time. By exploring their lives and their identities, we reclaim a vital part of all of our shared history, and honor the legacy of those who lived authentically, even though oftentimes it was in secret. Okay, so who would ever want to hide the gay people, right? Yeah, who would ever want to do that? Well, oftentimes, the West. Non-Western expressions of gender and sexuality were often dismissed or misrepresented, that's a nice one, Voyak, by colonial and Eurocentric perspectives. So a lot of like colonizing, that had a huge play in this type of thing. There's also a really big problem with straight washing. That also ties into colonialism, because who was documenting a lot of this history was oftentimes the colonizers, and they did not like gay people. And lastly, of course, since this is a historical thing, a lot of queer people, they were secretive about their lives to keep themselves safe and avoid getting killed and all of that other stuff. So they would have a lot of codes and a lot of that type of thing that they would label themselves with. Starting off, we're going to go into the ancient world and discuss two of them are people. One of them is more of an identity, which we will get into. So starting off with, we have Sappho. So all of you guys have probably heard of Sappho. If not, I'm going to be very surprised, or at least you've heard that Saph kind of sounding thing, that name. She was a poet, and she was a lesbian poet, and I kid you not, the island that she was born on is called the Lesbo Island, and that is not me being like that. That's serious. So the term lesbian, it derives from where she was born, and the term sapphic is from her name. She was a poet, and I mean, there is some debate about her identity, because we'll get into that later on, but a lot of her works were featuring some very gay themes, to the point where, I mean, it is speculated, but it's highly likely to be true. The next one, I don't know how to say his name, but he was a Roman emperor I'm going to say Elagabalus. Elagabalus? Okay. And this person, I'm going to refer to them as they, because once again, it's hard to slap labels, but you'll see. This person defied gender norms and sexual norms in crazy ways, like to the point where they were born male and fully would dress female, use female pronouns, and even begged a doctor at one point, said, I will give you all of my riches, all of my everything, if you can perform bottom surgery on me to have female anatomy. Of course, that wasn't possible back then, but I think it's still worth noting because obviously bottom surgery wasn't really a thing in ancient Rome. Next is Two-Spirit, and all of their real gender diverse identities and indigenous cultures. So not just Two-Spirit, but this is the most well-documented and well-known, at least from what I could find. But the term Two-Spirit it's a new term. That's not what I'm sure it was called by the actual indigenous tribes that used this. It's kind of a term for their cultural identity that is somebody that isn't binary. They kind of embody both spirits. That's why it's called Two-Spirit. They feel equally masculine and feminine at once. And these identities have been around a while. So this is just, like I said, what was documented. And all of them vary across different tribes. But like I said, I'm using the Two-Spirit because it's the most known. So this type of gender queerness and that all gender stuff was really prevalent across a lot of Northern America's indigenous people. Next is the Renaissance era. I don't know why I'm so tongue-tied today. The first one is a classic. I always like to talk about him because I'm an artist myself. Da Vinci. I'm sure you all know who he is. You definitely know his painting, The Mona Lisa. He never had any romantic relationships with women ever and was known for having male companions, and was even arrested at one point for engaging in gay sex. It's really worth mentioning that a lot of his sculptures, if you ever look into, this is just like a bit of personal trivia, if you ever look at some of Da Vinci's sculptures, especially his sculptures of women, you're going to notice that they look a little bit off. And that's because he was so into dudes that he would use men as his reference models for everything and then just slap boobs onto them. So they look really weird and off-putting and like abnormally round. Just check it out someday. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, he was a gay icon. Queen Christina. Queen Christina is the OG butch lesbian. She was raised as a king rather than a queen and defied gender roles in literally every single way. She was known to have all kinds of same-sex romantic relationships and even had kind of a little shoddy bae there that was her handmaiden that she repeatedly referred to as her bedfellow and beloved and stuff like that. She was so masculine in her gender presentation that her biological sex would get confused sometimes, which is pretty interesting. I don't know how to pronounce this. This is a very hard French name. But this, I'll say D'Eon, I think. D'Eon was a diplomat, spy, soldier, and fencer way back when King Louis was in charge. I don't know which King Louis that is because I don't remember what XV stands for, but one of them. I know there was a bunch of them.
14.
Yeah, 14. Yeah, King Louis the 14th. Shout out to whoever said that. I love you for that. So after serving some of these missions, D'Eon came back and literally just came out as trans, actually to the king. And weirdly enough, the king supported D'Eon in this, and just this person lived the rest of their life as a woman and had no issues with it, and were just chill and went around with she, her pronouns, name change, and all of that good stuff. For the rest of their life, which is really cool considering the fact that this took place in 1728 and then they lived until like the 1800s, but still very early on. It's crazy that the king would actually support that. Do you know what I mean? Shout out to King Louis, I guess. Moving on to the 19th century. Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is a very famous Arter. Yep, author. So a lot of his writing, similar to Sappho, I mentioned a bit back, about how a lot of her writing was really gay. And like most of it was very gay and homoerotic and etc. Walt Whitman was just like this, but a gay version. During the time that he was writing, homosexuality was very frowned upon. So this is a huge speculation as to like if he's gay or not. He's denied it before, but I mean, literally all of his writing is about being gay in a way that's like he knows a little too much. So that's why it's heavily suspected that he is actually a gay man. He just wasn't able to come out at that time because of his safety and obviously his livelihood. Ann Lister, this is actually the most interesting person that I researched in this entire presentation. So Lister lived openly as a lesbian. There was no term for her identity then. She cross-dressed, was not having it with gender norms, and only dated women. So what's really cool about Ann Lister is that Ann Lister was like a crazy polyglot, which is even more impressive when you realize that this took place at this time period. But she actually made her own language and wrote in her diary that had 5 million words. Well, there was multiple diaries, but 5 million words in total. And she would write about her experiences as a queer woman in this secret language so that nobody could understand it, which is really cool. I think she touched a lot into her struggles with her identity and socializing as a queer person and etc. And I just think that's super cool that she combined all these languages in like ciphers and stuff to make her own language just to write in her diary. So this is another one I'm gonna have a hard time pronouncing. I'm gonna think it's gonna be Weewa, I think. Weewa. So we touched on Two-Spirit a bit ago. Weewa is the most documented Two-Spirit person. So it is very hard to find a lot of insight into Indigenous identities. There was a lot of them, but it is hard to find due to what we touched on earlier, a lot of queer erasure, a lot of rewriting, and just, oh yeah, we're gonna snub that part out of history on the colonizers' parts. But Weewa was actually an ambassador that traveled to DC, and they're the most, like I said, documented person that's Two-Spirit, and they contributed to a lot of our today's understanding with what was discussed and all that. Okay, the 20th century, this is where most of what you know about, most of the figures, this is coming up on our time period. Alan Turing, so this one was super depressing to research. He was the one that cracked the World War II code, which, oh crap, why am I forgetting it? The Enigma code.
The Enigma
boom.
machine.
Okay, yep. Boom, the Enigma code. So that actually was huge in winning World War II. And he cracked it, which is insane. And he was persecuted for being gay. Like, he did this crazy thing, and they ended up castrating him for being gay. And I am not even, I'm saying castrating, like literally castrated him. And he ended up killing himself 2 years later. So he saved the world, and because he was gay, completely discredited.
Modern
and they castrated
are also
him.
Possible because of him, and also
Yes.
revolutionized biology. Dude
Yes, he was very important, and it's really a shame what they did to him, solely just because of his identity. He was pardoned later on, and he is like known globally as a martyr, but still, I mean, you can't just, do something to somebody that makes them kill themselves and then be like, well, LOL, you're actually fine, you're not that bad. But anyways, still, amazing, absolute genius. Marsha P. Johnson, I couldn't leave out the queen, the icon. I'm sure a lot of you guys know Marsha P. Johnson because of her activism during the Stonewall Uprising, which is where LGBTQ people fought back against police brutality. If you've ever heard the term like, oh, through the first brick, that's in reference to Stonewall. She co-founded one of the first organizations in the U.S. that centered around trans lives called STAR. Super cool. She's a really famous one, and she's, lived a life of activism even before and after Stonewall, that was just one little arc for her. This was actually another super interesting one. Baynard Rustin, he actual huge part in the American Civil Rights Movement for Black rights. He was very close to Martin Luther King Jr. and actually promoted his nonviolent ideologies. Like, he was the GOAT behind that nonviolent thinking. He organized the March on Washington as well, and was a super proud gay dude. Like, he was just out and open about it. Unfortunately, his visibility was suppressed due to him being gay, and it's kind of like well, this isn't really the movement. Like, they were going for the civil rights movement for the rights of Black Americans, and they didn't want to mix in his identity into that because they're like, well, this is our struggle, not this one. So he ended up getting put on the back burner. So that's very unfortunate, but hey, that's why we're talking about him today. A huge figure in the American civil rights movement. So that's all of the figures that we have for now. But I do want to get into one thing, and I think I mentioned it at the very beginning of this. These are real people, and a lot of these people are dead and cannot speak for themselves. So we can speculate, but it's really important to know when to draw the line. While patterns in relationships can suggest queerness, gotta move on to the next slide, oopsie, we should not project labels like modern day labels onto people that, hey, those labels didn't even exist at the time for them. You know, like, some of these people died a very long time ago. We just need to approach these things with care, and there's no way of saying, unless they said themselves, you know, I am attracted to the same sex, or I identify as the opposite sex. Like, there's no real way to solidify that. It's mostly speculation. Just important to mention that. So why does this all matter? Like, how does this impact any of us, and why do the lessons we have learned throughout this impact any of us sitting in this world right now? So it's important to acknowledge that we have always been around, especially in a world today where people like to refer to LGBTQ as a trend or a fad or something that didn't exist until just now, and it's on TikTok, so all kids are turning gay. That's not true. And that's a really harmful and homophobic rhetoric, and this directly proves that wrong. So a lot of these people in this were gay, would have probably loved to come out and run around and I'm gay or I'm trans, and that's great. But the sad truth is that you can't do that, because going back even to the guy that cracked the Enigma code, I mean, that's what happened when you came out in a lot of countries and for most of history, at least our documented history. And by learning about all of these different people, that provides you with the information to, when you hear that type of harmful rhetoric being spouted, to go, you're wrong. Incorrect, and here is an example of that. And spread actual knowledge, because, I mean, a lot of people aren't educated on this. A lot of people have no idea. And if one of these figures is brought up and you say, hey, they're gay, they're not going to know. Like, that's something that was important to that person's identity most of the time, and it's completely wiped out and forgotten and just erased like it never even happened. So the TLDR, this presentation was all about uncovering the stories of LGBTQ plus people who helped shape our history, regardless of if their identities were hidden, erased, etc. From poets to scientists, they all lived in times that often tried to silence them. And by remembering them, their stories, their identities, etc., we're not just, looking back, but we're reclaiming our place in history. And acknowledging the people that came before us. Boom. That is a first Google image result for a pride parade right there. If that doesn't spread the gay, I don't know what does. Okay, so that's all I had. Now would be the time, if you have any questions or comments or etc., I will do my best to answer them. And a rainbow bunny.
I have a comment.
Yay!